Someone gave an AI zero budget, zero constraints, and zero compromise, and it designed the most menacing luxury motorhome I have ever seen. Before we get into it, this is an AI-generated concept design. It does not exist in any factory. No one is building it. No one is selling it. It is pure imagination. And that is exactly why it is worth analyzing. Because when you remove real-world constraints, you see what design could become. This thing is called the Aurelian. The tagline on the wall behind it reads "Mobility Beyond Boundaries," and after spending serious time with this concept, I think that phrase is doing a lot of honest work. Here is what we are doing today. We're walking the exterior first, because there is a lot happening on the outside of this vehicle that most people will miss on first glance. Then we are going inside. And I want to tell you right now, based on what the exterior is communicating, the interior is going to be a very specific kind of statement. Then we hit the powertrain logic, and we close with a verdict where I will tell you exactly what I think this concept gets right, what I think is borderline delusional, and the one detail at the rear axle of this vehicle that I genuinely have not seen executed like this before. I am saving that for the end. Let's go. The front face of the Aurelian hits you like a boardroom. Not a road vehicle. A boardroom that happens to move. The DRL's signature, those sharp, angular chevron lights flanking the lower fascia, are not decorative. They are a design language statement. This face is communicating authority. It is communicating that whoever is inside this vehicle arrived on their own terms and intends to leave the same way. The central trident badge sits dead center on the nose, which in proportion terms tells you this designer understood something important. Symmetry at this scale reads as power, not timidity. What does that mean for you as the person living in this vehicle? It means every time you pull into a location, a resort, a film set, a private estate, the Aurelian announces itself before anyone inside has said a word. That is intentional design psychology. And it works. The windshield is enormous. Panoramic, steeply raked, wrapping around the front face and bleeding into the side glass in a continuous arc. For the driver, that means a sightline that feels more like a cockpit than a cab. You are not peering through a letterbox slit at the road ahead. You are inside a glass room that happens to be moving at highway speed. That is a fundamentally different driving experience. And the glass-to-body ratio here is closer to a luxury coach than anything in conventional motorhome design. Now look at the side profile, and take your time here, because the proportions are doing something unusual. The roofline is flat. Not curved, not tapered, flat. That is an architectural choice, not a lazy one. A flat roofline at this scale communicates interior ceiling height, and it signals that the designer's priority was not aerodynamic drama on the outside. It was livable volume on the inside. You will understand why that matters when we get into the interior breakdown in a moment. The body is deep obsidian black with a gloss finish that, in this showroom lighting, is behaving almost like a mirror. Light is pooling along the lower body panels, tracking up the gold pinstripe trim lines, and disappearing into the upper panels. This is not a vehicle that would look the same in two different lighting conditions, and that is intentional. A finish like this is alive. It changes with its environment. In desert sun, it would look brutal. In city rain, it would look cinematic. Those gold trim lines deserve a full sentence. They are not decorative striping. They are structural panel markers. They trace the geometry of the body, mapping the angular transitions between surface planes. Functionally, they are telling you where the engineering decisions were made. Aesthetically, they are the only warmth on an otherwise cold vehicle. That tension, cold authority, warm accent, is exactly the brand positioning the Aurelian appears to be chasing. The stance. 6 wheels. Dual rear axle. This vehicle is sitting on what appear to be custom multi-spoke rims finished in gloss black with gold hardware. The tire profile is relatively low for a vehicle this size, which in proportion terms gives the Aurelian an aggressive, planted stance rather than the tall, ungainly posture of most motorhomes. It looks like it belongs on the ground. It looks like it chose to stop here. And there is something at the rear of this vehicle, a specific structural decision around that dual-axle configuration that I think is the single most interesting engineering hypothesis in this entire concept. I am not covering it until the verdict. Keep that in your mind. The exterior section of this concept is resolved, almost unnervingly so. But the exterior is also making promises about the interior that are going to be very expensive to keep. Let's see if it earns them. Here is how we do this when there are no interior renders. We do detective work. The exterior of a vehicle tells you almost everything about the interior if you know how to read it. Ceiling height, zone distribution, light quality, spatial philosophy. It is all encoded in the outside. So let me walk you through what I think is almost certainly happening inside the Aurelian and why I think that. First, ceiling height. The roofline sits visually at approximately 4 meters from ground level. The wheel diameter on those rear rims appears to be in the 24 to 26-inch range, which gives us a rough scale reference. Strip out the floor structure, the chassis depth, and the subfloor systems, and you are almost certainly looking at a finished interior ceiling height of somewhere between 2.1 and 2.3 meters. That is stand up straight, arms above your head clearance. That is not typical for a motorhome. That is an apartment. For you, that means the interior of the Aurelian does not feel like a vehicle. It feels like a room that is traveling. The psychological effect of genuine ceiling height in a mobile structure is enormous. It is the difference between camping and living. Now let's talk zone layout. Based on the exterior length, which from proportions I would estimate at somewhere between 13 and 15 meters, the habitable interior breaks logically into 5 zones. And the placement of each zone is almost certainly dictated by the window positioning we can read from outside. The cockpit occupies the front third of the upper level. That panoramic windshield and the wraparound side glass creates a driving environment that in a real build would likely feature a fully digital instrument cluster, head-up display, and some form of autonomous highway mode integration. You are not sitting in a truck. You are sitting in a command center. The sightlines from that glass are wide enough that the designer appears to have intended the cockpit itself to be a destination, somewhere you would want to sit even when parked. Immediately behind the cockpit, the lounge zone. The large side windows in the midsection of the Aurelian are too big and too low to be privacy windows. They are view windows. They are designed to frame a landscape, which means the furniture placement in that zone is almost certainly oriented toward those windows. A sectional seating arrangement, angled toward the glass, positioned to make the outside world part of the interior experience. Natural light flooding in from both sides. Imagine sitting in that lounge. Late afternoon. Desert landscape stretching out to the left. The gold trim lines running along the exterior framing the view like a picture rail. That is the sensory promise this exterior is making. Moving further back, kitchen zone. Positioned logically in the mid-to-rear section, away from the windshield, where the ceiling transitions and the service infrastructure, water lines, waste systems, electrical routing, becomes more practical to integrate. In a concept at this positioning level, you're almost certainly looking at induction cooking, not gas. Gas requires ventilation engineering that complicates the sealed, climate-controlled philosophy this vehicle appears to be chasing. Induction means clean surfaces, flush integration, countertops that disappear when not in use. The sleeping quarters would sit toward the rear, above the dual rear axle. This is the most interesting placement decision in the entire interior layout, and here is why. Positioning the sleeping zone over the rear axle in a 6-wheel configuration means the occupant is sitting at the most mechanically stable point of the vehicle while stationary. On a dual axle, the rear platform barely moves. You are sleeping on what is effectively a fixed foundation. That is not an accident. That is an engineering choice that prioritizes sleep quality. The bathroom. In a vehicle with this ceiling height and this floor area, a walk-in wet room is feasible. Not a compromised RV bathroom with a toilet wedged against the shower, a proper wet room with standing clearance, linear drain, and enough surface area to feel like a hotel bathroom rather than a boat cabin. The graywater management in a real build of this size would require a substantial onboard tank system, likely 200 liters minimum, with a smart dump station detection and connection system. But the space for that infrastructure exists in this chassis. Smart systems, climate, connectivity, solar management would be run from a central hub, likely integrated into the cockpit zone. Predictive climate logic that reads GPS data and preconditions interior temperature based on destination environment. That technology exists today in high-end electric coaches. In the Aurelian, it would feel native rather than retrofitted. The interior this exterior is promising is one of the most spatially resolved mobile living concepts I have analyzed. Whether a real build could honor those proportions is a different conversation. But as a vision of what mobile living could feel like, it is serious. If this were ever engineered for reality, the Aurelian would almost certainly be full electric. There is no question about that. The design language, the sealed surfaces, the absence of any visible exhaust architecture, the clean lower fascia, is not diesel language. It is electric language. A combustion drivetrain at this size and weight class would require exhaust routing that would visibly compromise the body geometry. The Aurelian's bodywork has no accommodation for that. The designer was thinking electric from the beginning. In a real-world build scenario, you're looking at a battery pack in the 350 to 500 kilowatt-hour range. For context, a heavy electric coach like the iRiser IE bus runs approximately 500 kilowatt-hours. A long-haul electric truck platform runs in the 600 kilowatt-hour band. The Aurelian would sit somewhere in that territory, enough for 400 to 600 kilometers of highway range at motorhome speeds, depending on load and climate system draw. The solar roof, which the flat roofline makes exceptionally viable here, would not be a primary power source. Let's be honest about what solar can realistically contribute at this scale. A fully tiled roof at this footprint might generate 4 to 6 kilowatts under optimal conditions. That is not propulsion power. That is interior systems power, climate, lighting, refrigeration, connectivity, sustained indefinitely when parked in sunlight. The solar logic on the Aurelian is off-grid endurance, not range extension. The dual rear axle raises an interesting hypothesis about drivetrain architecture. In a near-future production scenario, you would almost certainly be looking at individual electric motors at each axle, possibly torque vectoring capable, which would give the Aurelian a theoretical all-surface capability that no conventional motorhome possesses. Each axle pulling independently. That is not a luxury RV drivetrain. That is an overlander's drivetrain wearing a black tie. Autonomous highway mode. The glass coverage on this vehicle is extensive enough to support a full sensor suite, LiDAR, radar, cameras, integrated invisibly behind the panels. In a 2030 to 2035 production window, Level 3 autonomous highway capability would be a baseline expectation at this price positioning, not a feature. The Aurelian's architecture accommodates that without compromise. Here is my honest take. What the Aurelian does genuinely well is proportion. This is harder than it sounds. Motorhomes are notoriously difficult to proportion, because you are trying to maximize interior volume while making something that reads as intentional rather than inflated. Most motorhomes look like buildings that forgot to stop moving. The Aurelian looks like it was designed from the outside in and the inside out simultaneously, and the two decisions met in the middle without fighting. The flat roofline, the aggressive stance, the continuous glass arc. These are not compromises. These are choices. That is rare in this category. What seems impractical, and I want to be specific here, is the gloss black finish in real-world use. I understand the visual statement. In a showroom, under controlled lighting, It is extraordinary. On a highway in July, behind a truck, it becomes a maintenance liability. Gloss black at this scale shows every watermark, every dust particle, every stone chip. In a real build, you would either need a ceramic coating requiring professional maintenance every few months, or you would watch this vehicle age badly and visibly. The design is right. The material execution for a vehicle that is supposed to actually move through the world, that needs a conversation. The most impressive detail, and I have been sitting with this, is the DRL signature on the front face. Specifically the way the angular chevron light elements connect visually to the gold trim lines running down the body. When you trace the geometry, those lights and those trim lines are part of the same visual system. The front face is not designed in isolation from the body. It is the starting point of a line that runs the entire length of the vehicle. That level of design continuity at concept stage is genuinely sophisticated. Most concepts nail the face or the body. The Aurelian appears to have nailed the conversation between them. One thing I would change: the badge placement on the side door. The trident emblem sitting mid-panel on the entry door breaks the clean surface geometry. That panel is doing important visual work. It is the transition between the front third and the rear two-thirds of the body. Interrupting it with a badge, however well designed, is a mistake. Move the badging to the C-pillar, where it frames the sleeping zone glass. Let that side panel breathe. What the Aurelian signals about luxury mobility is this: the category is moving away from ornamentation and toward architecture. The old definition of a luxury motorhome was wood veneer, crystal fittings, and as many surfaces as possible. The new definition, and this concept is arguing for it clearly, is spatial resolution, material restraint, and design continuity. Less decoration, more intention. The Aurelian is not a vehicle trying to look expensive. It is a vehicle that has decided what it believes and committed to it completely. That is a harder thing to design. And it is a more interesting thing to analyze. It is a concept. It is fictional. It is AI generated. And it is still one of the most resolved motorhome concepts I have put serious time into. Now here is the question I want you to answer below, and I genuinely want to know where you land on this. The Aurelian's flat roofline maximizes interior height but sacrifices aerodynamic efficiency, which costs range. The alternative is a tapered roofline, better range, lower ceiling. Which do you prioritize? Maximum interior ceiling height or maximum driving range? There is no right answer. But there is your answer. Drop it below. If this kind of design analysis, where we slow down, read the geometry, and take fictional concepts seriously, is what you come to YouTube for, subscribing is the most efficient way to make sure you do not miss the next one. I will see you in the next breakdown.